Well, I would like to see more implementation of a salutogenic approach to healthcare. There are basically two ways that one can look at healthcare. One is the traditional medical model or the pathological model, which seeks to detect, diagnose, treat, and prevent specific diseases. Not that that's necessarily a bad idea, it certainly has a place, but what's missing are salutogenic strategies. And the term saludogenesis was originally proposed by Antonovsky when he was looking at what he called a person's sense of coherence and looked at some of the dynamics that are involved in people who seemingly enjoy health. And this kind of goes back to the work of D.D. Palmer, who raised the question, why can there be a situation where two people working at the same job, living in the same home, eating the same food, find themselves in a situation where one enjoys health and the other does not? So salutogenesis literally comes from salus, which means health. Uh, some have even gone so far as to define in terms of invincibility. So, what do you do when you toast someone? Salute, you're wishing them good health. Why do soldiers salute one another? Because they're wishing each other good health and success and invincibility, a good thing to have uh, if you're going into a challenging situation as they are. In a salutogenic model, we're looking at strategies that create health. So, what's health? As we said, according to WHO, complete physical, mental, and social well being, not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And other professions have looked at salutogenic strategies. A very powerful salutogenic strategy, of course, is the location analysis and correction of vertebral subluxations, which is where chiropractic has its focus. And when we look at the challenges that people are facing today, um, salutogenic strategies are conspicuously absent in the discussion in the media and in the public health community. Do you hear people saying, hey, it's important for you to get your spine checked for vertebral subluxation so you can adapt more effectively to the challenges you're facing? Don't hear that. You hear people saying, um, other than some small groups that advocate this, but certainly not the mainstream, it's really important that you take a look at your nutritional status, what you're eating. Um, it's important that you get out and exercise. Even if you have to maintain social distancing, you can certainly get out and walk. Walk your dog, ride your bike, get out and exercise. That's really important. Get some sun. Um, go out into nature. Make sure that you are following whatever spiritual path is yours. If you're a person used to going to church, don't let that by. If you're a person who utilizes practices such as yoga, tai chi, and the like, uh, continue that practice, even if it requires doing so online, remotely, or by yourself, or with other people, maintaining uh, what you feel are appropriate social distancing guidelines. We're just not hearing that. And these things could be significant factors in how well people adapt to the stressors that they're facing. You hear people say, oh, I need to eliminate stress, I need to manage stress. Well, one of the highlights of my career, and this goes back to the 70s, was when Hans Selye visited Palmer College and he spoke to the students and he made himself available to the faculty after. And it was really a fascinating story. He told us how he got into this whole stress thing. And he said he was a student studying medicine at the time, and he was in a class in differential diagnosis where the exercise was to look at the subtle differences in clinical presentations and try and figure out why the person had this disease rather than that disease. And he said this class was presented in an amphitheater, and kind of at the bottom on the stage, the professor would bring forth patients that had various problems and explain their history and their clinical findings. And then he'd call on students to go through the exercise. How would you determine what this patient has and what the appropriate course of care would be? And he said, I was looking at this parade of sick people passing before me, and I thought to myself, they all seemingly have something in common. I'm not sure what it is, but there's a commonality there. And he said the professor apparently saw that his mind was kind of wandering and said, Selye, what do you think is wrong with this patient? And he said, why, doctor, he's sick. And everybody chortled and had a laugh at Selye's expense, but it started him on that path. And he talked about how the engineering concept of stress could be applied to animal physiology and ultimately to human physiology and how we interact with the world. And today, when most people hear the term stress, they think of something very negative. They think of, the freeze, fight, flight response, that primitive response that is hardwired into us to respond to life-threatening challenges going back a long, 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 long time. And today we tend to trigger that, but the challenges we face don't have the same appropriate response. We don't have to run from a saber-toothed tiger. We don't have to fight much, or hopefully not very often, a physical assailant. But if somebody cuts you off in traffic, or if you have a fight with your boss, or if you have a challenge at home, you tend to elicit that fight flight response without an effective means for expressing it. And what Selye pointed out was that this phenomenon of stress and adaptation isn't negative. It doesn't have to be negative. That's only one side. In fact, he called it dis-stress, dis-stress, which I think is kind of interesting because D.D. Palmer talked about dis-ease, dis-ease, where neurological dysfunction is present. And Selye said, there's another side of stress. And he called it eustress, EU-stress, as in euphoria. And he said, eustress is the good stuff. He said it's the spice of life. And you think about it, why do people jump out of airplanes with parachutes for the rush? Why do they eat food that burns on the way out as well as the way in? Why do they watch movies that they know will likely make them cry? They're trying to expand the scope of the human experience.
You fly planes, or historically you would fly planes, right? That's that rush you're
Yeah,
talking about, that eustress.
yeah, absolutely. It was really a rush. A copy of Flying magazine arrived one day that had on the cover, "You can fly a fighter jet," and I thought, well, that sounds cool. And I read the article, and yes, you can. There are places that make that available.